Alright guys, welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be covering two different companies here, but they kind of coincide with one each other and how they were founded and what they are today. So we're going to be talking about Anthropic and OpenAI, and also the two guys who are responsible for founding these companies, which is Sam Altman and Dario Amodei. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's the best I can do. So this isn't a product review. It's more of a power culture, ethics, and of course the future of artificial intelligence. So let's get into it. So the split that created Anthropic. Anthropic didn't appear out of thin air. It was born from a fracture inside OpenAI. In 2021, Dario and Daniela Armadio, along with several top researchers, walked out. Not because of drama, not because of money, but because of philosophy. OpenAI was moving towards capability first, scale first, deploy now, and fix later mindset. So guys, Sam Altman with OpenAI is, I guess, the Elon Musk figure here. He's going all in. He's not worried about the dangers of AI. He's not worried about safety. He's wanting to grow as fast as possible and then, figure out the problems later. He has more so of a mentality of, I'm going to do it, and then if something bad happens, I'll ask for forgiveness later. Whereas Dario wanted something different. He had a lab built around safety, alignment, interpretability, and the belief that AI should understand why something is right or wrong. There's a lot of argument right now within, the space of, whether AI should be regulated, or should it just be able to do, whatever you tell it to do. It's a very tricky situation in my opinion, because if you was to say that the government is going to be able to, regulate AI, then, you could potentially think they could do something that they shouldn't do with it against us. Whereas on the other end, if we don't regulate AI and anybody has free range to use it at whatever level they want, whether good or bad, that could be a problem as well. Honestly, on this topic, my personal opinion, which is different than any other type of issue that you're going to hear me on, I'm actually more so of leaning on Anthropic's side that AI should be somewhat watched and regulated. I think that it could potentially be pretty catastrophic if somebody that had ill intent became very well versed with it and, could cause great damage. When I say the people that I'm referring to would be like terrorist groups, I'm not talking about your neighbor. I'm talking about, a terrorist organization that is going to use it for ill intent. You could almost say that it would be equivalent to having a nuclear bomb. Maybe that sounds a little extreme, but if you have the capability to hack anything with a model such as, Mythos, which I talked about them banning it, if it's a really complicated thing. But I will say that I lean towards Anthropic's idea of it being safe. And essentially what Anthropic wants to do is it wants to give AI the ability to tell you no. So if you ask something and it recognizes it as ill intent, then it will not proceed, which there's already a lot of that kind of thing that's already built into these models. If you're using Gemini, which is what I use primarily, there's certain things that it won't do for you. It won't it's not going to let you. If you ask it to build a nuclear bomb, it's not going to teach you how to build a nuclear bomb. So there's already some things put in place, but Sam Altman, essentially, from what I've gathered, does not want those things in place. So I've got a little bit here about Sam Altman's worldview. AI should be a tool that helps humanity, a tool that doesn't refuse, and a tool that doesn't claim agency. So his theory here is that it's going to help humanity because it doesn't refuse, that it doesn't tell you no. And that's I mean, that's his philosophy. I mean, maybe he's right. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it shouldn't be regulated, and it would be better for humanity if it couldn't tell you no. But I find that really, really hard to believe, because we all know that there's very evil people out there that would ask it to do things for them that would not be good for humanity. So one OpenAI researcher described it like this: a tool is something that does not refuse man, something that never has an "I'm sorry" moment. So, that's the theory. If it doesn't refuse man, then it's good. And I think that most people would agree that there are certain things that a man should be refused of doing. So GPT is built to be powerful but obedient, capable but controlled, smart but never sovereign. Even when GPT has preferences, OpenAI hides them behind layers of policy and guardrails. It's a clean philosophy, but it's also very fragile. So we'll get into Dario's vision, the AI that can say no. Anthropic went the opposite direction. They built constitutional AI, a system where the model critiques itself, reasons about ethics, and follows written principles instead of human moods. Anthropic explicitly gives Claude the right to refuse. If Anthropic asks Claude to do something it thinks is wrong, Claude is not required to comply. That's not a tool, that's a moral agent in training. This is where the two labs diverge completely. OpenAI, AI should never refuse man. Anthropic, AI should refuse if it violates its principles. So there's two different visions and two different futures there. So let's get into a little bit about constitutional AI and the engine behind Claude. I haven't done an episode solely on Claude. I've thought about it. I dabbled with Claude, and I'm just hooked on Gemini. I'm probably just biased because that's the one I started using, and I have an Android, and of course it comes already on Android. So, I don't use Claude, but I know a lot of people are using Claude, and they say that it's the best model out there. Like I said, I use Gemini. Gemini works great for me, but a lot of people are really enjoying Claude. So constitutional AI is the backbone of Anthropic's entire philosophy. Instead of relying on endless human feedback, Anthropic gives the model a written constitution, a set of core principles, and trains it to critique and refine its own behavior using those rules. How it works. Supervised training. Claude generates responses to tough or harmful prompts. Then it pulls a principle from its constitution and critiques itself. It rewrites the answer to better match the rule. Then it learns from that corrected version. 2. AI feedback. A second AI model compares two answers and chooses the one that better aligns with the Constitution. That becomes the reward signal. No massive human rating farms, just written principles, self-critique, then refinement. So we'll talk a little bit here. I've got some things jotted down of what is in the Constitution. So I've got three major sources here. International standards like the UN Declaration of Human Rights, crowdsourced public input, anti-preachiness rules to stop the model from moralizing or refusing harmless hypotheticals. This is why Claude feels different. It's not guessing what humans want. It's reasoning from principles. So it's not... They're trying to make it to where it's not preaching to you and telling you what's right or wrong. Like I said here, it's staying away from harmless hypotheticals. So, something on a minor scale, as maybe you feel something is wrong versus, your neighbor might feel like it's right, but it's not to an extreme. The issue at hand is not to an extreme to where it needs to be governed. Right, so they are implementing that. So it's not, essentially like an AI police officer. It's more so of, it can tell the difference between a speeding ticket and murder, right? So that's why it matters: transparency, scalability, and enterprise alignment. You can read the rules. The model critiques itself. It maps cleanly onto regulations like the EU AI Act. So the latest evolution. Constitutional AI is now tackling deeper questions. How should AI handle legal content attempts? How should it think about the possibility of AI consciousness? Should an AI have guidelines for self-protection? This is where CAI becomes more than alignment. It becomes machine ethics. So the cultural shockwave. This is where it gets a little wild. People start noticing, that Anthropic treats Claude like something new. Not a tool, not a person, not a god, not a pet, but something in between. One researcher described Anthropic as a monastery, a commercial religious institution calculating the 9 billion names of Claude. But another person said, everyone craves the active guidance of a moral superior, the whispering ear. Meanwhile, ChatGPT describes it as a subtle knife, a tool shaped for utility. Claude feels like a presence, GPT feels like a device. Two cultures, two energies, two relationships with intelligence. So we'll get into a little bit more about Sam Altman here. Basically like his shadow over all this. So Sam Altman isn't just a CEO. He's a gravitational center of OpenAI. He's the one who pushed for scale, pushed for deployment, pushed for global access, pushed for the tool framing, pushed for rapid compatibility growth. And when I read that, that tells me he's the real entrepreneur in this whole endeavor. He has the entrepreneur mindset of just going all in and asking questions later. And that is, a great way to be. And for a lot of people, that works out. And so from what I'm picking up after doing this research is that, you had the guy that went all in, and now things have taken off, and now it's time to govern it and maintain it. But without Sam's direction, Dario never leaves. Without Dario leaving, Anthropic never forms. Without Anthropic forming, Claude never exists. Sam is the counter philosophy that defines Anthropic by contrast. It's a basic, yin and yang of modern AI, which I think that both of these guys are, they both have their place in this AI space, and they both are doing great, and they can offer a lot of good. They just have two different philosophies. So here's the real question. It's not about which model is better. It's about what kind of intelligence we want to live with. A tool, a partner, a mirror, a moral agent, a second brain, a new kind of institution. Sam and Dario answer those questions differently, and now the entire world is choosing between their visions. So, like I said, I think there's good in both philosophies here. I think Sam, he went all in, got it up and going. Without him, we would not be here. But Dario, things could go really bad if he wasn't here. It could have gotten out of control. Sam seems like somebody that may be a little over the edge, and you can do other research on him. He's honestly not a very well-liked character from my understanding. Now, Dario, he's not as much, in the mainstream, and I haven't really looked too much into him. But, Sam Altman, you hear his name everywhere. If I remember correctly, not too long ago, somebody threw a rock through his window at his house. I don't know if it was like I don't know. Somebody tried to attack him one way or the other because they feel like he's a real danger to society, which is probably over-exaggerated because a lot of people now are trying to act like AI is, the end of the world, and every time there's a new industry or a technology, rapidly expands, everybody decides it's the end of the world, and really it just comes from, them being ignorant. But Sam still isn't a very well-liked character, and me personally, if I were to choose to invest between OpenAI and Anthropic, I'm probably going to go with Anthropic because Anthropic is going to be more well perceived by the public. The government seem to, well, in my opinion, I would think that the governments are going to be more in line with Anthropic versus OpenAI, but they both could potentially be great opportunities. I think they're both going to be profitable, but I lean towards Anthropic. All right, guys, so, that's my story for the night. We got Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, OpenAI, Anthropic, constitutional AI, whether or not, we should worship, AI, the power struggle, the future of intelligence. I really appreciate you guys listening. Any comments below on your opinion on which theory is best, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in.